Hello, and welcome to the virtual Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. My name is Adina Kirstein, and I am the Director of Special Events. I hope we find you safe and healthy at home. I'm thrilled to welcome you to Authors in Quarantine, Community Book Talks with Julie Baer. This is one of many virtual ways the JCC is connecting with our community right now while our building is closed. So please join our email list and check our website to learn about offerings, including daily meditation, films, and more. While we can't see you in the building, we would really love to see you online. Tonight's conversation is in the capable hands of our friend Julie Baer. A native New Yorker, Julie began her career as a bookseller at Shakespeare and Company. Her first job in publishing was at Sanford, Greenberger and Associates. Julie started her own agency, Baer Literary, in 2004. In 2015, with three other partners, she launched the Book Group. Julie represents a variety of writers across a literary spectrum with a special emphasis on fiction. Books she represents that were published in the last year include Inheritance by Danny Shapiro, Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, Book of V by Anna Solomon, Patsy by Nicole Dennis Benn, and Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano. There will be time for questions from the audience tonight, so please feel free to submit yours at any point during the conversation by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And lastly, if you have not had a chance to read tonight's featured book, I encourage you to order through our friends at bookshop.org. Now, please join me in welcoming Julie Baer.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining us. I hope everybody is safe and sound and healthy, and I hope you all have electricity. I am really excited to be here tonight with Lysley Tenorio. Lysley is the author of two books, a short story collection called Monstress, and a novel recently out and wonderfully praised called The Son of Good Fortune. Lysley is a recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Foundation, a Whiting Award, a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford, and the Rome Prize, my personal favorite because you get to live in Rome for a year, among many other accolades and awards. Recently, stories from his collection Monstress have been adapted for the stage by the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco and the Nye Theater in New York City. Born in the Philippines, he now lives in San Francisco, and I'm so happy to have him here. Lysley, I want to ask you a little bit about your writing routine pre-COVID, in the before times, as I like to refer to them.
Right, the good old days.
The good old days, indeed.
Yeah, first of all, it's so good to see you, Julie.
I know.
I could be in New York with you. It's strange not to
Thanks.
see you in New York City, but happy to be here with you. And thank you to the Meyerson JCC and to everyone tuning in. I appreciate the opportunity very much. Writing before COVID. I'm actually on sabbatical this year, so it was kind of a strange situation. Pre-COVID, we were in New York for the fall, and we were all set to go to Spain and Istanbul for the spring. That got a little sidelined, so we were in rural Indiana for about 4 months, where my partner is from. Quite different from Madrid, I hear. We just got back to San Francisco 2 weeks ago. So before COVID hit, well, for one, I was very focused just on getting the book edits done, as you know, Julie, and thinking about how to get this book out into the world. In between those moments, I would be taking notes and trying to figure out what the next book or the next writing project would be. And it felt really good to just have all the time in the world to focus on those things, especially when I'm on sabbatical and not worrying about teaching. Yeah. Once COVID hit, it was really difficult to focus on writing and to focus on getting this book out into the world without feeling a pang of guilt, admittedly. Yeah. With so many difficult, challenging things going on in the world, and especially lots of people are, it goes without saying, just having a really hard time to be focusing on a book, whether the production of a book, publication, or writing a book. It suddenly felt like it shouldn't be as much a priority. But I have to say, when I would get back to the writing, those moments that I could, it just felt really good to be immersed in this act of creating. Even when it wasn't going so well, just to be engaged with the keys, just to feel myself typing again was a way, I don't know, not to shut out the world necessarily, but maybe it was a way of renewing my faith in it. If people can still stay creative and productive in difficult times, maybe we can return to some semblance of normalcy sooner than we expect. Who knows? But
Do you feel like this, everything that's going on has changed or affected what you're writing and the ideas that you're having about what you want to do next, or are you sort of staying true to what was in your mind in the before times?
right. Um, I I'm not necessarily the kind of writer who wants to or is necessarily inspired by the most contemporary of specific events like the pandemic, for example. But I have been thinking about what really matters to me.
Mm.
So trying to figure out, am I going to write an essay, which I normally don't do, but with your encouragement, I've been in essay mode and thinking this
And
is
you're so good at it, actually.
so hard. They're so hard.
It is hard.
I've been trying to write this piece about my mother. And I think when the subject is that heavy and that personal, I think that's when I really think about, what is going on in the world right now? Is this the thing I really want to be doing? So I don't know if I'm necessarily, thinking about writing about what's going on, but what is happening certainly impacts the way I view work and the
Yeah.
subject for sure.
I'm glad you brought up your mother, because this is really a novel about a lot of things, about a lot of ideas, but it's really a novel about mothers and sons.
Yeah.
And I think it's a novel about what one mother kind of gives up and aspires for the life of her child that maybe she didn't have, or that she wants for him, that the opportunities that she sees are possible for him, which I think is a very common dream for the children of immigrants, for first generation Americans. Um, and I feel like it's really a love letter to a mother, because she's so Maxima, the mother in this novel, who is a sort of a B movie action star back in the Philippines, um, and and her son is Excel, the spreadsheet, and she gives up a lot to have him have a life in America. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about who she is to you. It's not an autobiographical novel. I'm pretty clear on that. We've talked enough about, and she's such a wonderfully. I mean, I think one thing I want people to know who haven't read this book is that even though this is a book that deals with a lot of really serious issues, Maxima takes her son Excel out for his 10th birthday and tells him that they are Tago. Did I say it right?
Yes.
TNT. Hiding and hiding. She reveals to him the truth that he doesn't know until that point, which is that he's not in the country legally. And it's a truth that will affect the rest of his life, the direction of his life, really. This young boy who sort of, until that point, the world is wide open to him. And suddenly in that moment, so many doors shut. And really the shape of what his life is meant to be changes. And yet, I think she feels that just by bringing him there, his life is full of possibility.
Yes.
So she's a wonderful mother in many ways. She's also kind of wild and unusual, and very funny. And I thought you could talk a little bit about their relationship, more about mothers, and what was important to you to convey about their relationship.
So when I first started this novel eons ago, it originally was a book about DVD piracy and these DVD sniffing dogs and these Filipino DVD pirates trying to assassinate these dogs. Quite a different novel. Maybe I'll return to that material at some point. As much fun, maybe. Or maybe that should be a memoir. Whatever sells. As much fun as that material was to work with, I found that the most substantial aspect of that book was the relationship between the narrator, who would eventually become Excel, and the mother, who would eventually, in the way, would become Maxima. in that original version of which is, it's quite different from this book. The mother figure was only existed in flashbacks. She was actually she passed away. But as I went through numerous drafts, I just realized all that really matters, the only thing I really care about, that I think the reader would care about, is the mother-son relationship. And so it was kind of a reversal for me. I'm a pretty plot-driven writer. My book of short stories are very plot-driven. But I realized I couldn't work this way for this novel. I actually had to build a novel around a mother-son relationship. And one of the things that I knew early on was that the mother, who would become Maxima, had to be, I think the challenge would be for this young man, Excel, to finally realize that the strongest person in his life is his mother. And that's something he doesn't really get early on. And this idea of strength was something that was really important to me. I think we see in a lot of immigrant fiction and the immigrant narrative, where you have the very strong mother figure who also has a kind of fierce reserve and perhaps doesn't really unleash that strength until maybe a pivotal moment later. Right. It was important for me that Maxima not only be emotionally and psychologically strong, but physically strong. Yeah. I wanted her to be the physically strongest person Excel has ever known. And I think I was inspired by that because my mother, who's a strong woman, was also physically strong. I remember she was, I think, almost 60. And one time I came home and she was on the second floor outside the window on the roof with a rope tied around her waist, painting. And I was just thinking, please don't ask me to help you because I'm terrified of paint. And my dad, is like holding this rope, and I was like, are you MacGyver? What is this? And she was just so physically strong. And I wanted a physically strong woman near the center of this book, a physically strong.
And she's a single mom. And I think
yes.
it's such an important choice to give her some agency. There's nothing pathetic about her. I mean, I think that she owns the situation she's in. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of opportunities, but she makes the most of what she's got.
Absolutely. And those choices are questionable, but she's a flawed human being like everyone else is. I mean, she's an online scam artist, doing her best. Yeah. So that's how that mother-son relationship came about.
Where I mentioned earlier, I'm sort of all over the place, but it is a book about mothers and sons. It's a book about what it means to be in a country where you don't really have the agency to do everything, and how much that shapes Excel's choices and life.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what it felt like to be writing a book that is kind of political. I mean, it's a political issue. It's a social issue. It's a cultural issue. It's all these heavy things. You manage it, I think, with an incredibly light touch, so that it's heartfelt and it's funny and it's not weighted down by political, discourse. But it is in some ways a novel about immigration. And I wondered if that weighed on you, if that felt like something you had to, think about as you were writing the story.
It's funny you say that, because I think you used the phrase discourse or political discourse, and there literally was maybe about 5 pages of political discourse. At a point, Excel is watching this debate on CNN, and it just feels as though I'm taking from the news and trying to incorporate all the different opinions and perspectives on this. And in fact, like a lot of fiction writers, I did a lot of research for this book. And you sort of hit that point in the writing where you feel, I've acquired so much information, I want to incorporate it, prove my street cred on this topic. But what inevitably happens is that you overwhelm the narrative with a lot of, not extraneous, but information that doesn't really serve these characters' lives.
Yeah.
So I really had to, in many ways, pull back and figure out if this book is trying to say something, and I don't want to look at this book as a political document or some kind of, decision on a challenging issue, but the politics are there, obviously. Right. So I do need to engage that to some extent. And so I can really only deal with those politics in the context of Excel's journey. And he is someone who just wants to live his life in peace, be able to pay his bills. He's not out to, fulfill the dream of super immigrant or wonder citizen.
Right.
He, in many ways, he kind of wants that American privilege that so many of us have, which is simply to go about our day, mind our own business, pay our bills. He's not aiming for remarkableness. I didn't want to create an immigrant narrative that supports this idea of, you immigrant person must, if you're going to be here, you got to earn your keep, and you got to do all these.
Got to be a superstar. You have to be a doctor and discover the cure for cancer. And
absolutely. And many do. Obviously, many do. Excel is not that guy.
Yeah.
Of course, I want his life. I want him to recognize what's remarkable in his life within the context of all that ordinariness. So, that's how I was able to, I think, engage in these.
It's interesting because he almost has to find a different America in order to really discover who he is and what he wants, right? So he grows up with this knowledge that he's not in the country legally, that so many doors are going to be closed to him. It sort of makes him feel like, well, what's the point even? And then he meets this young woman and he heads with her to Happy City, which is this sort of utopian, bohemian, hippie, drop out of society community in the desert, which I think I read in an interview with you is based on a real place.
Yeah, so Hello City is based on Slab City, which is a real off-the-grid commune-like Burning Man-esque desert community in very, very far south in California.
Have you been?
No.
Research.
That was definitely a lot of research on YouTube, but I'm tempted to go. Actually,
I'm tempted to go. It was really. I mean, we could go together when this is over. It made me think a little bit of like Marfa, the sort of the landscape and the way the artists are sort of like incorporating the natural world into their work, and but it sort of felt like he needed to drop out of society in a way, in order to find his place. And I wondered whether you felt like. I guess I wondered whether that was the only way that you felt he could find himself.
Yeah. This idea of, setting the book in California was a very deliberate decision, and setting it in Colma, which is a town right outside of San Francisco, most famous for its 17 cemeteries. The dead outnumbered the living in Colma, literally. So that's where he grows up, and he feels like he has no opportunities there. And so I think this idea of treating California as a kind of frontier, this sort of landscape for possibility, the only way I think he could engage that was to be in this sort of off the grid community where anything goes. The basic policy is, do unto others. So he thinks he's found this place where he can be his most authentic self and no longer hide. But because he's in this fringe community, it's questionable how much he really is engaging reality. Not to discount life, an off the grid life, but he thinks he's found this authentic existence. But I think that's the question for him. There is where he's in Hello City, and he thinks, okay, I can finally reinvent myself and be who I am. Yet he's still making up stories, and he's still lying to get by. So the idea of escaping reality, has its limits for someone like Excel.
And all your stories too were set, a lot of them in California, and you grew up in California. Can you imagine writing about somewhere else, or do you feel like that's kind of like in your blood?
I can imagine writing about other places, but I think right now, with Monstress and with the novel, California just felt right. I've been working on these loose drafts of short stories, and some of them are taking place like in rural parts of America that are barely on the map. So I'm curious to see where those things go.
Would you talk a little bit about the difference between working on stories and a story collection and making the transition to a novel? I think that most people who aren't writers maybe won't understand what a challenge it is to go from a form where it's almost easier, I think, sometimes to tell everything you need to tell in a compressed way than to be faced with, oh my God, I have to fill like at least 250 pages. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what it felt like creatively to sort of have to make that expansion.
Right. In my experience, the short story, which is the form that I fell in love with and made me want to become a writer, the short story was in no way any preparation for the form of the novel. With the short story, you're constantly exercising this idea of economy and compression, because you want, a short story, ideally you read in one sitting, 20, 25 pages. You're constantly thinking, how much mileage can I get out of one sentence or one scene? It's got to do double, triple duty. And it's also with a short story, you sort of aim for this kind of perfection because you can kind of hold it in your mind all at once. With the novel, I sort of had to train myself not to be so economic with the way I handle scene and with the way I handle language. And I remember there were moments where I would be writing, 2 people at breakfast thinking, oh my God, it's 5 pages at breakfast already. That is unheard of. I think I'm defective somehow. So the kind of liberty that you crave when writing a short story of expansion, suddenly you have all that possibility in the novel, and it's hard to tame. And before, with the short stories, I'm counting pages to make sure it doesn't get too long. As I was drafting the novel, I'm counting pages to see if it's even long enough. So
I seem to remember a few of those emails.
Oh, right, probably. Probably.
And so when you think of an idea, is it very clear to you, oh, this is the kind of idea, this is a plot, or this is a character that I can only deal with in the short form, or this is something that I really need the longer form to explore?
Yes. Yeah. I have a good sense of what should be a story and what should be a novel, especially now having finished one. My instinct was always short stories, but now I think, sort of a bigger arc, the possibilities of the longer form for sure.
Was there something that surprised you as you were working on the novel about your own writing that you didn't know before?
I was surprised that I finished it.
I was not.
You know.
I was not surprised. I knew you would get there.
Took a while. I think so. Oh, I forgot the question. What was I? Was there?
Was there something that surprised you that you learned about yourself or about writing when you were working on the novel that maybe you hadn't come across in the stories?
I was surprised by how far uncertainty could take me. With the short story, I felt in so much control, but there were moments where I would be, in the novel, and I knew, okay, in this next chapter, I know they go to Target a lot for some reason. So I know they need to go to Target.
So does a lot of America. So,
it's a very American story. So I knew, like, there might be a scene where there might, like, an accidental shoplifting. That's a pivotal moment in the book for some reason. So I knew that had to happen, but I didn't know how it would happen. I didn't know how long it would take. So I actually became very reliant on this amazing app called the World's Most Dangerous Writing App, where you go online and you go to this site and you either write for 3 or 5 minutes, but once you start typing, if you stop for 7 seconds, you lose everything you've written. So it's horrible.
So upsetting.
It is very upsetting. It's one of the most
terrible person.
I have a horrible process. But there were these moments where I thought, okay, I know they need to get to Target. Trouble's going to happen, but I don't know what's going to happen. And that was a perfect opportunity to force myself just to generate material.
To keep going.
And see what happened. And
wow.
a lot of that stuff, which I, of course, revised, but a lot of that stuff made it into the book.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And I never worked that way for short stories.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the thing about how long it took you, because I think that there is this misconception that it should take a certain amount of time, and I wonder why. Like, I think it should just take as long as it takes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, no editors who have actually paid any of my clients advances for novels that they have not yet delivered are listening to this conversation.
Right.
I think they have very specific ideas. But I wonder why we sort of feel this pressure to kind of to speed it up and to make it happen a certain, amount of time. I mean, it's for your career, it's for tenure, it's for publicity, but it's interesting because a novel's a really hard thing to rush.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely felt the pressure and would get really down about how long it was taking me to write the novel. And certainly, social media never helps. As much as you want to,
Yes.
raise a fist and cheer for whoever else's most recent publication, you're just thinking, what is taking me so long?
Right. They finished 2 books. I haven't finished 1 book. I have clients saying that to me about other clients all the time. Yeah.
Right. And it's, you got to find a way to filter that stuff out. But what I really learned with the novel is that, when you're committing to this longer form, you really are living with this story and with these characters in ways that, I certainly didn't with the short stories. And and when I say living with, it's like this project is happening alongside your life. And as you know, Julie, lots of stuff happened during the writing of this book. I lost my mom, which was just unimaginable to me. And, I admitted it took a good number of years to really get back to writing seriously. I mean, I would think about it in terms of working so hard. So I really learned that you have to live with the project you're working on and accept that it coincides with life. If you can't accept that, it will be very, very difficult to be okay with when it finally came out.
Yeah. Did your mom get to read any of the book?
No, she didn't see any of this book, but it was very sweet. My mom, she would often she referred to my writing as homework. And so, even toward the end when I was like helping her out and helping to take care of her, she would always say, "Oh, go do your homework, go do your homework," which made me feel like a student forever,
Right.
What made me happy and grateful. I mean, she saw Monstress, which I'm so grateful for.
She must have been so proud.
She was very happy. She threw me a book party at El Torito, the Mexican restaurant in Mira Mesa.
Right.
She understood that my writing was my work, even if she didn't necessarily understand the idea of literary fiction or an MFA program. She knew this was a kind of job for me. She understood that I taught, but she also knew that I wrote.
Was that a hard conversation to have when you were like, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a teacher, this is my path? Or?
Yeah, I feel lucky in that I never had the conversation. I think so. I'm the youngest of 5. Hello to any siblings out there watching. I'm the youngest of 5. We're all about 5 years apart. So by the time I came around, I think my older siblings kind of paved the way for me to make my life a little freer. And so my parents didn't check in too much. They didn't look at my report cards. They kind of just trusted that he's doing what he's doing. Nice. And so I don't recall ever announcing to my mother that I'm going to write. But certainly when she saw Monstress, the physical book of it, I had this picture of her next to my big head on the Barnes & Noble ad in Mira Mesa, holding my book. Once it was physical and tangible, that book, she really understood. Was very supportive.
Did you feel a responsibility to portray the Filipino American community in a certain way for her or for your family?
I don't know if I felt well, no, I to some extent, I feel a responsibility. I think a lot of writers want to feel free to write whatever they want.
Right. I think every writer feels that sort of like, if my parents are reading this, or if my community is reading this, am I representing Philly right? Am I representing, my neighborhood right? The high school I went to. But I think even more so with an immigrant community, I feel like there's this, get it right because you're our public face a bit.
Right. And I think it would be naive to completely separate myself from that expectation. Whenever you're part of any group, if you put something out in the world, it will be seen as potentially representative. So yeah, I definitely thought about how Filipinos and Filipino Americans are represented in my book. And I have to say, writing about an undocumented Filipina immigrant woman who is also a scam artist on the side, tricking men into falling in love with her. That's not the most flattering portrayal, but I have to just trust that any reader that I'm lucky enough to have will realize this is fiction and I'm creating as best I can an individual character who hopefully at least resonates with some emotions that a reader can relate to.
I think you painted her so lovingly and so humanly that I think, like you said, she has flaws, but we all have flaws.
Right.
And she's working with what she can work with.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm coming to the what do you wish you were asked about your writing or your books that you never get asked, or you wish you got a chance to talk about more?
I wish that I was asked more about what non-literary things inspire my work.
That totally makes sense to me because there's so much great pop culture and comic books and movies, so much stuff in your books. And it's true, I'm surprised. I love that stuff makes its way into your fiction. And not a lot of literary writers actually do feel that comfortable incorporating that kind of element.
Yeah. I think, growing up in an immigrant family, when immigrant families arrive, the TV, at least back then when people were still watching television sets, that was sort of how you access the culture. That was the easiest way to engage and participate. And I certainly grew up in that kind of family. So pop culture is a huge influence on my work, not just in terms of subject matter, but also in terms of tone. I'm especially drawn to anything that might seem, culturally illegitimate or campy. I remember, so I grew up listening to the Carpenters, Karen Carpenter, and I remember trying to write. I was living in New Hampshire at the time, trying to write, and I was just listening to that song Top of the World, which is very poppy and happy. But there's this one moment where Karen Carpenter says the line, something like, I hope tomorrow will be just the same for you and me. And the way she sings the word same has such an ache in it. And of course, Karen Carpenter's story is very tragic.
Yeah.
But I remember when I kept rewinding to that moment where she sings the word same, and I thought, that is the tone I'm going for in my work. That there might be easy, there might be, a kind of, easy harmony to what might be happening externally, but underneath, there's an ache there. And I think when I'm engaging things like silly action movies or comic books, superheroes, that stuff is really fun to deal with on the surface, but underneath there's turmoil there, and there is a heartache that I'm really, really trying to explore in the work.
Well, certainly you think about the backstory to so many superheroes.
Right.
And there's tragedy. I mean, they're all just terrible. If you have a young kid and you're trying to explain to them, like, why do they all have these terrible backstories?
Yeah, they're all orphans,
They're all orphans, yeah. And scarred emotionally, which is why they lead double lives, I guess.
Right.
And have hero complexes. It's funny. I feel like there's almost a sort of elitism about literary fiction where we don't talk about genre and we don't talk about other art forms. We always ask the question, what are the books that influenced you? But I don't feel like you often get to say, like, what are the movies that influenced your fiction? What are the songs that influenced your fiction?
Yeah, and I'm definitely a product of all of that. I really, really am.
That's great. I'm going to start asking that question more.
Great.
Are there writers that were particularly influential to you when you were finding your voice?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I just wrote an essay about her for the Library of America, Bharati Mukherjee.
Yeah.
Passed away in 2017, I believe. She was an American writer, originally from India. She was my professor at Berkeley. I took a class with her just to fulfill a requirement, no intentions of writing at all.
Really?
No, didn't even think about it. And then I picked up her book. I thought, oh, she's my teacher. I should read her book. And
That's very nice of you.
yeah, I was a good student sometimes.
You are.
But I remember just being blown away by these short stories about immigrant America. It was the first time I read something that actually felt important. Not just meaningful to me, but it felt like there's something really important here. And it was the thing that made me, it made me realize I want to give this a try. Had I never read that book, and had I never met or worked with Bharati Mukherjee, I don't think I would have become a writer. I really, really don't. Yeah. This is kind of a before and after moment with her. Before I met her and then after.
Can you imagine doing anything else?
I have like ridiculous dreams that are not within the realm of possibility. I don't think anybody wants me fronting a rock band, even though, I
never
can no oeuvre by memory. Writing is hard. Writing is work, and there are moments. And this is a strange feeling that I'm having now, is that now that the book is out, this was under contract for so long, and I owed this book and I wanted to write this book, and now it's like no one is waiting necessarily for another book from me.
I'm waiting.
But suddenly it's like the world is full of possibility, which is daunting. If I wasn't writing, I would want to do something that involved the act of creating. I have to say, as tough as writing can be, and lonely, quite often, I really appreciate the fact that my work is this act of creating something out of nothing. I love that idea.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I probably cannot imagine doing anything in the foreseeable future.
Don't. Okay, this is where you get to ask me a question.
Okay, so the question I'm going to ask you, and I guess this is sort of similar to what you just asked me. If you were not a literary agent, what would you be doing and why?
I would own a bookstore.
Oh, okay.
It's a cop-out, but it's true. I would have to be something with books. And I worked at a bookstore. It's how I got my start. I loved it. I love the experience of putting a book in someone's hands and then having them come back and tell me what they loved about it, and then finding something else for them that they might like. I'm also deeply unqualified to do anything else because I have a women's studies degree from a liberal arts college, and I've been doing this job for 20 years. So I have really no marketable skills.
I think
we're in a very similar, sometimes I think I could be a really good personal shopper, but I think actually I just like to shop for myself. And like the people I like. I don't know that I could really offer that talent as it is to the public at large. No, I don't think.
Did you know from an early age you wanted to do books?
Oh no. No, I had no idea. I didn't know it was a job. Does anybody know what a literary agent is? I feel like there are people in my family, not the people who are listening tonight, but who still think I'm like an editor, I'm a publisher. What do I do? I make the book, I print it. No, when I worked at the bookstore and I really got to work the floor, I started asking around, how do you get to do this job, but just earlier in the process and maybe make a little more than $5.50 an hour.
Right.
But I didn't know that really this job was a job until I started, applying for it. And even the first agency I interviewed at, they were like, why do you want to be an agent? And I was like, what do you guys do here again? It's with books, but what exactly?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
That's interesting to hear that we both kind of fell into this book world, because I did an event with Sarah Birmingham, my editor, and she was saying she knew from the time she was a child that she wanted to be an editor.
So crazy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing.
Right.
It was meant to be for her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel so lucky that I stumbled into this world and that I found a job that I love to do so much, and that has so many layers and levels. You know, because an agent gets to wear so many hats.
Right.
And that I get to work with writers like you. I mean, it's just, you know, I remember when this book came in finally, and you were like, it's terrible. And I was like,
when you wrote back and said, this is farther along than you said.
Yeah, you were like, it's not. I was like, yeah, I mean, if it's going to be better than this, we're going to be in really good shape.
Sigh of relief.
It's a thrill to be involved in books like this. And,
well, I couldn't get it out in the world without your patience and support. To have those things at the same time were critical.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again. Absolutely.
Would you read to us from your wonderful book?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think what I'll do is I'll probably just read like a page from the very beginning.
Great.
And so this is the prologue, and it is a moment with Maxima, who I said earlier, she is an online scam artist, and this is a bit of one of her scams. Maxima in the dark, half lit by a Virgin Mary nightlight and the glow of a screensaver, a slow motion sweep of stars and planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Earth. Dressed in denim cutoffs and a Mickey Mouse tee, she doesn't shiver despite her wide open bedroom window and the cold night beyond. She sits at the foot of her bed, cleaning her nails with the tip of a switchblade. May bakas ka bang nakikita sa aking mukha, she sings. Like all her favorite Filipino love songs, this one is about heartbreak. An alarm goes off. The digital clock glows red, 10:10 p.m., and she closes the switchblade. She stands and stretches, takes quick jabs at the air, 1, 2, 1, 2, then flips on the desk lamp and sits, turns on the ball-shaped webcam atop her monitor. A tap to the spacebar and the galaxy vanishes. Now her face fills the screen. Using it as a mirror, she puts on maroon lipstick and dabs with the Kleenex, smiles wide to check her teeth. She undoes her ponytail and shakes out her hair, a long black wave, then turns her face side to side, searching for her best angle. She could easily pass for 30, but is somewhere in her 50s. Her true age, she swears, is a mystery even to herself. Her parents, long since dead, kept no birth certificate. The grandmother who took her in never bothered to learn her actual birthday. Eyes closed and fingertips on the keyboard, she whispers to herself so softly that a person standing next to her would have no hope of knowing what she says. She takes a deep and slow breath, opens her eyes, types and clicks until another browser window opens. There is a man on the screen.
I mean, people, how do you not want to go buy this book right now? Hopefully. This is what it looks like. Go to bookshop.org. We're going to open it up for some questions. Let me see who's queued up here. Please feel free. Okay. This lovely person said, I absolutely loved this book. I especially loved the fact that all the characters are complicated, none of them perfectly lovable, but also all of them impossible not to love. Oh, love that. Was there a moment in writing the book that was especially painful or joyful for you? Good question.
That is a really good question. You know, there were definitely painful moments. Sad moments, you know, especially intimate moments toward the end between Excel and Maxima, between mother and son. It was hard. It's not autobiographical at all, but you know, it's hard to say sometimes. But I remember a particularly joyful moment. So I was at the Bogliasco Foundation in Italy. I think you and I talked from there once.
Very jealous.
It was awesome. But I remember I was at a residency working on the book, and so part of this takes place in this off-the-grid community called Hello City. And it's called Hello City because there are all these helipads that were left behind in this landscape. So there's the letter H dotting the desert. And Excel contemplates, what could H stand for? And at a moment when I was really struggling with the book, I realized that H also stood for hiding, which I never
Oh
thought.
my God, right.
Tago, hiding and hiding. And when I realized because the Hello City storyline was a little meandering, I realized he has to finally wake up to the fact that he's not living his life in Hello City. He's hiding from life. How do I get him to that point of realization? And when that came to me, I remember I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought, I can't believe it's like right in front of me the whole time.
I just figured out the key to the whole book.
I like high-fived the air. I was so
That's amazing. Okay. In your mind, for Excel and Maxima, what was the difference between the good Target or the bad Target? This person is not sure they've ever been to a bad Target, and I'm going to say the same.
Maxima calls one Target the good Target, if I'm remembering right, because there was a point where when she would shop at the good Target, an elderly Filipina cashier would sometimes give them a discount on the slide. That's why they called it the good Target. Because in Colma, there are two Targets. One's technically in another city, but they literally face each other, separated by a freeway. So there are two Targets in their lives. A good one and a not so good one.
A good one and a not so good one. Do you want to tell us at all anything about what's next? Or is it a secret?
What's next? We talked earlier about the short story. I'm really antsy and I want to write a short story. I just want to be able to write something that's complete and I can hold it in my hands and conceptualize it in my head. But of course, no surprise, it's challenging once again. But it's always
it's never going to be easy.
No, I've not reached that point.
I think if it was easy, more people would do it.
Probably. I think you're right.
Thank you for joining me, Lysley. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to encourage you. They actually have done a beautiful repackaging of Monstress to match this incredible color. I don't have it with me, but it's on the webs, as they say. Please pick up these books. Please pick them up from your local independent bookstore. It really means a lot. I don't think Jeff Bezos needs any more of your money. So you can get it at your own local independent. You can get it at bookshop.org, which supports independence. You can listen to it on audiobook at libro.fm, which is a great way to support independent bookstores.
And can I ask you real quick?
Yes, please do.
If anyone out there picks up the book from a local indie and takes a picture of the book and the receipt from the local indie, I have these great book plates that Echo sent me. I will sign it to you and I will mail it to you so you can stick it in your book.
People, how can you pass that up?
Yeah, and I'll send you a bookmark too. I got these great bookmarks.
Okay, I'm going to go out and buy a copy and send you my receipt. I want a book plate.
So
a book plate and a bookmark. Rush,
run,
don't walk. But wear your mask when you go.
Yes.
We will be back in mid-September. I don't have a date yet, but I'm going to be talking to the wonderful Courtney Sullivan about her amazing novel, Friends and Strangers. So you have 4 or 5 weeks to pick that book up too and read it and come with questions. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody at the JCC. Please wear your masks and be safe and be healthy. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Good night, Lysley. Stay safe.
You too.
Bye.